Attention, everybody. The views and opinions expressed on this show are not necessarily those of Acts Ministry, Acts Media Group, and/or their affiliate and supported ministries and/or nonprofits. It's that time again. It's the happy hour with your host, Dr. Paul, and his lovely wife who brings beauty to the show, Miss Nancy Collins. Take it away, everybody.
All right. The chimes of time ring out the news. Another day is through.
It's beginning.
Someone slipped and fell. Was that someone you? You may have longed for added strength, your courage to renew. Do not be disheartened, for I have news for you. It is no secret what God can do.
I know that's right.
What he's done for others, he'll do for you.
I know that's right.
With arms wide open, he'll pardon you. It is no secret what God can do. There is no night, for in his light you never walk alone. Always feel at home wherever you may go. There is no power can conquer you while God is on your side.
I know that's right.
Take him at his promise. Don't run away and hide. It is no secret what God can do. What he's done for others, he'll do for you.
Amen.
With arms wide open, he'll pardon you. It is no secret what God can do. For those of you who are more inclined to have secular poetry, try this song for size. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. By Joyce Kilmer.
Oh.
And by the way, Joyce Kilmer was a man, not a lady.
You know what? I was just sitting here thinking of all the leaves that are coming down.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost like hard times come, the winds come, the snow comes, the rains come, all of that, and those leaves come down. But it's like a person's life with some kind of problem. Pretty soon, over a period of time, things return bright and beautiful, and the leaves are on the tree, and we still have rain, we still have wind, but our situation has changed, and only God can do that.
Well, and that little song that I sort of talked through
Yeah.
was written by Stuart Hamlin, who was a great friend of Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. In fact, he and Roy hunted mountain lions together. Stuart Hamlin helped to put Billy Graham on the map because when Stuart Hamlin, who was living a very questionable life, was converted in the Billy Graham meeting, it made headlines. And between Stuart Hamlin and William Randolph Hearst, publisher of a newspaper, they made Billy Graham famous, and then Billy Graham went on to become perhaps the most famous evangelist for the Christian faith that we have in history, although he's not the only great one. But most people have heard of Billy Graham. They know he died a couple of years ago at the age of 99. However, when he died, he'd been, if you counted the time spent in the womb, he lived 100 years. Here's how he became Billy Graham. He was William Franklin Graham Jr. And there was many years ago, because remember, Billy Graham, if he was alive, be a little over 100 years old now. there was a Sunday school teacher named Edward Kimball. Nobody's ever heard of Edward Kimball, but he presented the gospel to a guy, a shoe salesman named Dwight L. Moody, otherwise known as D.L. Moody. And there's Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and there's Moody Church in Chicago. Dwight L. Moody became quite an evangelist. And he presented the gospel to a guy named Wilbur Chapman, C-H-A-P-M-A-N, Wilbur Chapman, who was an evangelist. And it was Wilbur Chapman who presented the gospel to Billy Graham. And Billy Graham became an evangelist. And now we know the rest of the story, at least part of it. There's another great evangelist that some of us have heard of, those of us who are of an older generation. Younger ones have not heard of, but I suggest if you are among the younger ones watching or listening in on this broadcast today, go online and Google the name Gypsy Smith. Gypsy Smith, great evangelist from England. He made like at least 40 trips abroad way back. See, he died in 1947, so the trips he made were by sailboat and by steamer many years ago. And his first name was Rodney, but because he was reared in a gypsy camp, his name was Gypsy. They called him Gypsy Smith. And he never learned to read or write.
Oh, wow. So he didn't read the Bible?
Nope. But he could hear it and remember it. And
Goodness.
His personal testimony was so strong, people would come by the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds into his meetings. Of course, they had no sound system, but they would crowd into places and hear Gypsy Smith because of his testimony. Nancy, if you recall back many years ago when you and I had started Acts Ministry, 27 years ago or more now, and so probably 20 years ago, we had contact and a connection with a motorcycle gang in Texas. And many of them were former prison inmates, and they would go into prisons and witness, give their testimony, and lead many, many inmates to Christ. And when they would request of me educational opportunities, they wanted more education and so forth, I was very cautious because I said, we have to be careful that we don't educate your testimony out of you. Their testimony was their strong part for ministry. If they got so intellectual and quoting this person and that person, then they would lose the power of their testimony. Gypsy Smith is an example of an evangelist that all he had was his testimony. Isn't that amazing? So, hold on to your testimony. Now then, having touched on that, let me greet my first secretary, Shirley. Hi, Shirley. Good morning, dear. We love you very much, and we hope to see you again one of these days. The good Lord willing, then the creek don't rise and the snow doesn't fly too much here in Missouri, because Nancy and I, with the happy hour, we're coming to all of you, wherever you are in the world, from Springfield, Missouri, which I call Springburg, USA. We're in the southwest quadrant of the state of Missouri, and the state of Missouri is just about in the middle of the United States, which is just about the middle of the world. So we're almost in the middle of everything, although the center of population for the United States is now right outside a little town in Kansas, the little town of Osborne. 1,500 souls, and right outside of Osborne, Kansas, is the population center of the United States of America. How about that? Now, since I brought you up to speed on that kind of stuff, this is a day of variety, Nancy. Last week we dealt with evil. Today we're going to deal with some variety. I saw this yesterday on the internet and printed it off, And then it made the news this morning early that the FDA has approved remdesivir as a treatment for COVID-19 patients in the hospital. And here's what I found, and I won't go through all of this, just a little bit. This was yesterday they approved it's an antiviral drug. It's given through an IV, the needle in the arm,
That's why the hospital.
and it works to stop the replication of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. So SARS causes COVID-19. According to the drug's manufacturer, California-based Gilead Sciences Incorporated. Now, Gilead Sciences, who are they? Well, they're the company that does research into this kind of stuff. And that name sounds familiar to people familiar with the Bible. So I looked up this morning to refresh myself about Gilead. I remember when I was a pastor of a large denominational church up in north central Missouri many years ago, had a huge church, large choir, big pipe organ, had an organist and a pianist and a choir director, etc. And one Sunday, the choir special was going to be entitled, "There is a Balm in Gilead," B-A-L-M. And I recall, like yesterday, the choir director, Jane, said, "Now, Pastor, it's not balm, B-O-M-B," and she laughed, "it's balm, B-A-L-M, like an anointing oil. There's a balm in Gilead." Well, the reason for that is in Gilead is an area in the Holy Land east of the Jordan River. And it's very rocky and a little bit hilly. And Gilead comes from a word G-A-L-Y-E-D, and the G-A-L means heap or mound or hill. The E-D means witness or testimony. So the hills, the rocky hills, are a testimony. It's also, they just shorten it down in the Middle East to say, well, Gilead is a rocky region.
Oh, that's
However, it has spice and aromatic gums, that is stuff you take out of trees. And so as a result, you have the balm, B-A-L-M, of Gilead.
Wow.
So the Gilead Sciences Company in the United States are the ones who have come up with remdesivir as a treatment for COVID-19 patients in the hospital. Also on the news this morning, I heard them say that they now have approved some drug testing on children 12 to 18, that age range, of a possible virus protection. Now, all of this is happening, and even though this dates us on this program, I'm going to do it anyway. Last night there was the final debate between President Trump and former Vice President Biden. I did not watch the debate. I'm not into that. It frustrates me, and I'm just not into it. But I do get the reports the next day. And the report that I received this morning from more than one source is that the moderator of the debate, who's an employee of National Broadcast Company, NBC,
Oh,
a lady, interrupted Vice President Biden 22 times, but she interrupted President Trump 111 times. That's why I don't watch those debates. Can you imagine, in like an hour and a half, a moderator interrupts one of the debaters, the former vice president, 22 times, but she interrupts the President of the United States 111 times. Nancy, to me, it's almost like someone would like to be in a room with the president and ask him a question and start interrupting him to get your viewpoint in or whatever, you know. But since they don't have that privilege, and when they get to be a moderator, so-called moderator, of which I think that's using the term loosely, of a debate, they take advantage. To me, that's taking advantage. I wouldn't do that if I was moderating a debate between Matthew Pearson, our station manager, and Jason Cobb, our shift manager. I wouldn't interrupt those guys. To me, that's not being a true moderator, and it's rude. Okay, got that off my chest, sort of. I'll be fuming about it all day long, tell you the truth. We have some very important issues facing America besides COVID-19, which faces America and the world. Something that's really facing, yes, go ahead.
Well, we've got the unborn baby issue that, let's see, it's not the Republicans that are going to do that, but the other party that starts with a D doesn't mind killing babies.
Yeah, and they would take issue with that because, well, let's say up front here to not only to the people that listen in regularly, Shirley and Judy and Galen down in Texas, and the Ways and the Gages and the Elvers in Texas, and people, Jerry Chambers, my friend over in Chesterfield, Missouri, and all the others, Jane Campbell out in Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, that Nancy and I are anti-abortion, pure and simple. We don't hold with abortion under any circumstances. And of course, when I was teaching at the local college, one of the classes I taught was ethics, and in it we had to deal with certain issues that, see, ethics is the framework that you use to evaluate morals and morality. And it was pointed out, I pointed out to my students that people who are opposed to abortion are referred to by themselves as pro-life. Those who favor abortion call them
Pro-choice.
anti-abortion and anti-women's rights, because the abortion people say a woman has a right to choose because it's her body. The pro-life people say that the abortion people are pro-abortion, and the abortion people say, no, don't call us that. We are pro-reproductive rights and so forth. So it gets into semantics or the use of words and so forth to convey an idea. However you look at it, people start as an egg, and that becomes fertilized, and then, which I think scientifically they call it an ovum maybe. Then that's a fetus, and then it becomes a baby, and then it's born, and it's a human. Where does life begin? Pro-lifers like us, we say life begins at conception. Those that want to protect and promote abortion, they say it's not really a life if it cannot live outside the womb, and so therefore it's a part of the mother's body, and the mother has the right to do with her own body what she wants to do with it. We could debate this forever. We could debate it until that proverbial place freezes over. And here's what we need to bear in mind. To me, as a clergyman, I cannot escape my background, which says that God looked very unkindly upon those that took the lives of babies. And when you have a little tiny thing in the mother's womb that could live outside the womb, and you kill it, it's a horrible death for that human life. And in the Old Testament, there were occasions when people would begin to worship a god called Moloch, M-O-L-E-C-H, and they would sacrifice their babies to Moloch, and God punished them for it. There were also times during the period of the Old Testament when there were those in the Middle East who worshiped Baal, B-A-A-L, sometimes pronounced Baal, Baal. The symbol for Baal was an ox. And standing in front of Wall Street in New York City, in front of the stock market headquarters, there's a statue of an ox with the horns, sign of those who worship wealth, materialism. There was also a time when, in the Old Testament days, when they got off into the worship of Ashtaroth, a female goddess, and she promoted sensuality, sexuality, and pleasure. Well, we see plenty of evidence of that today. People decorating their bodies, people exposing their bodies, people who cater to their bodies, the flesh first rather than anything else, pleasure.
And people don't even realize it or think about themselves, what they're doing or why they're doing something.
And all of this gets us to the point where we have to say this. We are coming up, even though it dates this program, we're coming up on a national election here in the United States of America. Unless they have changed the figures since I got these, a third of those who are old enough to vote are not registered to vote. And of those who are registered to vote, ordinarily only about 60% of them actually vote. Which all comes down to this. The President of the United States will be chosen by 1 out of 5 who are listed in the voter database. And when you add to that problem, and you think about folks who are pro-life, folks who want to honor religion and its place in our society and make certain that religious rights are protected, etc., only half of those people vote. So these are, and there's nothing, see, our broadcast, even though we're international and we'll have lots of people watching this, some people won't see this till after the election, but even those who see it right now and those later, some would say, well, oh, Dr. Paul, it's too little too late. Well, maybe, but if just a few people hear us and go to the polls and vote the right way and influence a few others who influence a few others, and there are other broadcasters urging people, if you haven't voted, vote, and be sure you vote for life and vote for the freedom of the church, etc., make a difference. So we'll leave it there, what we're coming up on. Now, I have some other information that's relative to how important it is for those of us to vote and to vote for life. We have evidence now from our own government that Russia and Iran are both actively trying to influence the election in the United States, which means that's a nice way of saying they are looking for ways to interfere. And they are interfering in districts or areas and states that are very close that could go for the current president. They're not interfering in states that they feel like the current president will lose no matter what. Only the states that they feel like he may have an opportunity to win. So Russia and Iran want to take down the current president.
So
Now,
how are they doing that?
well, they are tapping into social media, any source of information they can get. And then they are posting things in social media and other broadcast outlets any way they can to plant ideas in people's minds so that they get into the old Soviet Union technique of not misinformation, because people can tell an outright blatant lie, but disinformation, just bending things, shading things, creating doubt. Nancy, this goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden.
I know that's right.
Remember, in the book of Genesis, just when everything looked hunky-dory, a snake shows up. A beautiful snake.
And it just sort of slithers in and
It slithered
out.
in, and it's couched there in a beautiful tree, and it's a beautiful snake. And the beautiful snake from the beautiful tree speaks to the most beautiful woman in the world, because she's the only woman in the world,
Yeah,
named Eve, and plants doubt in her mind.
that's right.
In the words of the old King James translation of 1611, he is quoted as saying, hath God not said? Planted doubt. So if they can get in our heads and plant doubt, it creates an emotional response and people will react accordingly. So anyway, it goes all the way back to Garden of Eden with disinformation. He did not start with a lie. He started with disinformation by a doubt, planting a doubt. Then he lied. So, folks, be on your guard. Remember, God loves life, and babies in the womb, they are life, and they are human beings. Once they are born and they're able to function on their own, then they're given, according to scientists and social scientists, the rights of personhood. But they have personhood even before science says it.
Yeah, and they have it when that baby is hardly born, but being born, and it's killed in the womb, or even as it is coming into the world, they are killed.
And that, by biblical standards, is murder. So you're not say, well, I don't care anything about the Bible. The Bible isn't my authority. All right. Then take a look at civil authority and what it says. If someone kills a pregnant woman, murders a pregnant woman, they are charged with 2 murders.
That's right.
The murder of the mother and the unborn child. So it speaks for itself, folks. The evidence is in, biblically and according to civil law. That baby is more than a glob of flesh. That baby is a person, even when it is still attached to the mother by an umbilical cord, inside or outside the womb. That baby is a person. Mm-hmm. All right. Anyway, Iran and Russia actively engaged in at least 4 so-called battleground states, including Florida and Pennsylvania. Some have received, some of the people that they know are President Trump supporters have received threatening emails, and they've even sent threatening emails to Democrats. Guess why? Because they're falsely saying that they are from a far-right group called Proud Boys and warned we'll come after you. So that gets the backs up of staunch Democrats who say, bring it on, and they're going to go and be very supportive of Vice President Biden. So it goes. It's called voter intimidation, and they use it on both parties to funnel their votes away from the president because they think they might get more favorable treatment policy-wise from someone other than the current president of the United States. So I brought with me, Nancy, Dr. Winding says show and tell is a good thing to have on TV. Show and tell, a book. You're looking at the dust cover. The book is hardcover. Live Not by Lies. Now, this was brought to my attention by our CPA, and our CPA is not a church attender, but our CPA is a staunch believer in Jesus as the Christ and staunch believer in Christian principles. Live Not by Lies is subtitled A Manual for Christian Dissidents. A manual for Christian dissidents. That is, Christians who will stand opposed to, in this case, socialism and communism. Mm-hmm. This is written by Rod Dreher, D-R-E-H-E-R. I suggest you go online and purchase it. That's what I did. Ron Dreher, D-R-E-H-E-R. He had a bestseller called The Benedict Option. But anyway, this one is Live Not by Lies. And here's something about Rod Dreher. He's a senior editor at the American Conservative. You say, uh-oh, there we go. He's just one of these right-wingers. No, he's a scholar and a journalist. He has written and edited for the New York Post, the Dallas Morning News, and National Review, and his commentary has been published in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. I'd say he covers the bases. He's the best-selling author of The Benedict Option, The Little Way of Ruthie Lemming, Crunchy Cons, and How Dante Can Save Your Life. Rod Dreher. And the book is Live Not by Lies. Now, let me give you an idea of its contents. In the dust cover, it says, over the past few years, America has seen the rise of a chilling, soft totalitarianism. In other words, it's like a creeping paralysis. It's like a creeping disease.
It's not really noticeable. It just creeps along.
That's right. Right. Until suddenly you wake up and you
That's
have
right.
it. Identity politics are beginning to encroach on every aspect of life. This guy's a real scholar, by the way. He's not just some wingnut case who lacks ability with the English language. This man's a professional and a journalist. Progressives, that is, the left wing of the Democrat Party, attempt to marginalize conservatives, traditional Christians, and other dissenters, sneering at the idea of civil liberties protecting their beliefs. Corporations now censor opinions with which they disagree. Technology is inching us toward a surveillance state, and consumerism has dulled our spirits, made us willing to accept a secularism, secular as opposed to sacred, secularism imposed not by gulags, but by softer means. In other words, what he's talking about here, soft totalitarianism, is a sort of thing that creeps up on us. It's not like an outright violent revolution like the Leninists had in Russia, and they overthrew the Tsar, and they put in place their hardline communism and anti-God and atheistic suppression of people. This is a creeping thing, so that we gradually lose our rights. I liken it to that old story about you put a frog in a pan of water, put it on the stove, you slowly turn up the temperature until the frog cooks so gradually that he doesn't bother to jump out. Whatever. Anyway, the book, Live Not by Lies. Where did he get the title? He got it from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was the Russian dissident, who was, because of his activities and his writings, expelled or exiled from Russia by the Soviet regime. And, of course, it was during the time Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II had a lot to do with the dismantling of the Soviet Empire, and it was completed during the presidency of George H.W. Bush, the first Bush president, and the USSR, which was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the Soviet Union, broke up, and so now we deal not with the USSR, but we deal with Russia, and it was Russia that formed the USSR. So, little history lesson. Now then, because of technology that can spy on us, that can track us, know what we like and don't like, I'll give you an example. Nancy's been very patient just listening to me today, but she knows this. I had a phone call just this past week, and it was a lady wanting to sell me a walk-in tub with a shower. Now, those are for old people, primarily. And that's why they have good old Pat Boone, who's my age, advertising them and others. And so she's starting her spiel, and I said, wait, why did you call me? How did you know my name? And, well, you live at so-and-so, don't you? And I said, yes. How did you have my address? How did you get my phone number? And I said, ma'am, I'm not being unfriendly. I'm being curious here. I'm inquisitive. I'd like to know how you know my name and my address and my phone number, and what makes you think I need a walk-in tub. So therefore, you must know my age. And she starts laughing on the other end of the line because she knows I've got her number just like she's got mine. I said, it's obvious someone collects information, and they have all this information on me. They know my name, my age, my address, and your company has purchased a list of people who would be a candidate for a walk-in tub, and that's the list you're working on. That's the way it works. They have your number. They have your address. They have your age. They know a lot about you. So, how did all that happen?
I know, but what did you ask her about tearing out? Are they going to pay for all of it?
Well, I said, now, I have three problems with your walk-in tub and shower idea. First of all, what would it cost to tear out our bathroom and make that thing fit? And then secondly, if we got ready to sell our home to younger people who didn't want a walk-in tub and shower, what would it cost to tear it all out and put it back the way it was?
Or if we didn't like it after it got put in.
Right. But the third thing was, I said, I just don't want one. I don't need one. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we had a nice visit, as it turned out. My point is, somebody's got your number in every way possible. They know everything there is to know about you. And one of the reasons is because of technology. Now, I was thinking about this late yesterday and then today I talk about my age on this broadcast. And some of you may get bored hearing about my age.
Well, if the Lord doesn't return and they get to be your age, they need to think about what you're saying now.
Well, true. However, think about this. I'm old enough. There are fewer and fewer and fewer people with my experience
That's right.
who are still alive, who are still talking, who are not disabled to the point that you cannot communicate. So, what a wonderful opportunity to see the world through the eyes of an 85-year-old and not just have to read it in a book, because you're not reading books anyway, most of you. So, I remember when we didn't have a telephone. I remember when we didn't have TV. I remember when the radio was there, but there was only certain nights of the week when you might be able to get some sound that came through as a static. I remember when cars didn't have heaters. I remember when there was no power steering, power brakes. There was no adjustable seats, no power windows. Barely had windshield washers, if we were careful. In fact, I remember when a lot of people didn't have an automobile at all. And I remember when the trains were running on coal. And in the wintertime up in North Missouri, we'd have a snow, and very quickly a big old train would go by, and soot and ashes, soot mainly, would fall on that white snow, and it would stay there until another snow would cover it up. And we have people wanting to get rid of fossil fuels now, that is coal and oil and so forth. Well, they drink out of plastic bottles that you can't make without oil. I remember when we didn't have plastics. Plastic didn't exist. World War II caused plastics to come into existence. The space age helped to perfect plastic and other matters. So we've come from times compared to today, very primitive times that I've experienced, all the way up to today, where Nancy and I both carry these, what I call stupid smartphones. We both have computers on our desk, and I have an iPad next to my recliner in our TV room. So we've come a long way, Mama.
I know.
But I've come 10 years farther than you, because
That's right.
I'm 10 years older than you. Anyway, and Nancy, born in Texas, basically grew up in Saudi Arabia because her dad was employed there by Arab American Oil Company, Aramco it was called then, and was a military wife and lived all over and traveled. And I've never been outside the continental United States, but I came from Moberly, Missouri. I can attest to that. And I have 85 years behind me. Nancy has 75 behind her. Between us, that's a lot of years. But we have noticed how technology has become really an integral part of life. Every 3 seconds, someone in the United States is a victim of what's called cybercrime, because we have computers and cell phones and so forth. If we didn't have them, there would be no cybercrime. Now, in the time that I said that, 2 people were victims of cybercrime in the United States. Wow. It's mind-blowing.
I have an idea.
Okay.
Never, ever thought this before, but you bring it up in a roundabout way. You know how I think. A person that belongs to Jesus, Jesus knows the thoughts and intents of our heart. He can absolutely head you off of the path before your thought in your mind or heart is finished. But there's the other side of the coin. Since Adam and Eve did their thing and they were cast out of the garden, okay, there's that snake of a devil that's leering all around, and he's not omnipresent like Jesus through the Holy Spirit is, and he's waiting to pounce on people, and they get so used to thinking the way they think or doing what they want to do, or all of these things, that they don't hear the Holy Spirit. and I'm not great at it, but I know 43 years ago I heard him literally talk to me. So that beats the fire out of any kind of, you might say, communication that this world has. Because he is over and above and so far out.
Someday, Nancy, we'll do a program dedicated totally to the Holy Spirit. How about that?
Oh, I know that's right.
But here we have every 3 seconds someone in the United States is a victim of cybercrime, and every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. That Matt, you'll appreciate this. I'll tell it quickly because we're running out of time. When I first started broadcasting, it was in St. Joseph, Missouri, at KFEQ radio, and we're in a studio about this size, and I had a table and a microphone. Outside the studio, there was an engineer, like you're off camera, but see, we weren't on camera. It was strictly radio. And on the wall, there were reel-to-reel tapes. A lot of people don't even know what reel-to-reel tapes are. You know, now we had recording tape that was wrapped around, and it was plastic or cellophane.
In a way, it was like the old movie theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like movie, but all the wall was full of these. A wall bigger than that one back there, Matt, full of these reel-to-reel, and all these buttons and switches, and an engineer not only sitting there, but one over there and one over there for this operation. For me to sit in front of a microphone, and at that table there was a button on the underneath side, so that if I had to cough, I pushed the button. It was called a cough button, and it killed the mic so that I could cough. And of course it was radio, and people didn't see me cough because it was radio. Right. Well, do you remember a movie about Elmer Gantry, the bad, he was a scalawag evangelist, I mean, big time. Anyway, they were advertising that movie, big advertising it, and the announcer would talk about the Fisherman's Club. That was my broadcast. Fisherman's Club coming up, and then they would run this commercial, and it was, "Look out, here comes Elmer Gantry." And Burt Lancaster played the part of this scalawag evangelist under a tent. And so here they'd announce the Fisherman's Club, and then they'd do this commercial spot, "Look out, here comes Elmer Gantry." Then they'd come back on and say, "Now here's Reverend Paul Collins with the Fisherman's Club." So that's the kind of stuff we put up with. So what we put up with here is nothing all that new. Matt, hope people find out that you don't have to live by lies. Live not by lies. And I hope people will watch us next Friday, because one of these days Nancy and I are going to get around to telling you some other interesting stuff. Remember, there was a Sunday school teacher, Edward Kimball, who was responsible for the conversion of Dwight L. Moody, who was responsible for the conversion of Wilbur Chapman, who was responsible for the conversion of Billy Graham. And so you know the rest of the story. Until next Friday, all of you be sure and take care of yourselves. And until then, as I always like to tell you, stay blessed.
Stay prayed up.